What would you do if the only person who made you feel truly alive was the one the world told you to stay away from? I used to think love at first sight was for the irrational. I built my first company at 24, signed million-dollar deals while my peers were still drowning in student debt. I made the cover of Forbes, listed under 30 under 30, hailed as the next pride of the Whitmore family, an esteemed political dynasty on the West Coast. I knew how to command a boardroom. I knew when to stay quiet at overly formal dinners. I knew how not to let my heart interfere. But that day, at a vineyard wedding in Napa Valley, I saw her, not the bride, not some high-profile guest. She held a camera, quietly moving through the crowd as if she existed in a different world, one I had never been allowed to enter. And with just one dance, I knew. I was living a life never meant for me. But do you know what truly sent everything in a direction no one expected? Stay with me, because that part is coming. Her gaze swept past me like I was just another face in the crowd. No surprise, no lowered eyes, no attempt to please. For the first time in years, I wasn't recognized for being a Whitmore. Not for my money, not for my title, but simply as a man, standing at a wedding, watching a woman he couldn't look away from. She wore a chestnut-colored dress. Not in line with the extravagant pastel dress code, but she stood out in a way that was utterly magnetic. I should have been focused on the bride. I should have been networking with my father's associates. I should have taken a few photos for Instagram to keep up appearances. But instead, I searched for her, in the crowd, through lenses, in every purposeful step she took. She wasn't wearing lipstick, yet every time she smiled, the world I lived in felt pale by comparison. Then the music started. A classic jazz tune in the middle of a modern wedding. She walked to the dance floor, not following anyone, not waiting for anyone. I hadn't planned to dance, but my feet betrayed my logic, and from that moment, nothing was the same. Do you remember the last time you did something completely unlike yourself? I do. It was the moment I stepped onto the dance floor, just to touch the hand of someone whose name I didn't even know. I'm not the dancing at weddings type. I'm usually the one sipping wine on the side, smiling just enough, polite to a fault. But this was different. Something about her pulled me out of the mold my family had carved around me since childhood. When I touched her hand, I felt something I thought I'd long lost. Life. Not the kind lived by expectations, but the kind that feels real in your chest. We didn't speak, we just moved with the music. Everything else faded. I remember the crystal lights glinting off her hair, the faint scent of wet grass from the vineyard, the feeling of wanting to hold on to something that had never been mine. Have you ever met someone who silenced you, but in that silence your heart said too much? When the song ended, I should have turned away, but I couldn't, because what happened next changed everything. As the music ended, her hand was still in mine. She smiled, not shyly, not cautiously, just honestly. The kind of honesty I'd lost amid closed-door meetings, dinners with people I didn't trust, and handshakes scheduled by assistants. She said her name was Celeste. No last name, no business card, just a smile and eyes that made me forget how heavy the name Whitmore was on my back. I didn't tell her who I was either, just Ethan, a test, a fragile hope that if someone saw me it would be the real me. No title, no wealth, no past crafted by legacy. And the funniest part? She didn't know who I was, didn't care, wasn't impressed. She just asked one question. So, bride's side or groom's? A simple question, but I stood there, heart thumping against my ribs, because for the first time I didn't know if I wanted to lie or tell the truth. And in that choice, fate began to shift. I was used to the look of recognition, the way people changed the moment they linked my face to the Forbes cover, but not Celeste. When I said Ethan, just Ethan, she nodded like it carried no burden. She shook my hand. No hesitation, no flattery, no act. "Bride's side or groom's?" she asked again. "Groom, Ryan. We were college roommates," I replied. Celeste smiled. "I'm gifting Grace the wedding photos. She was a classmate of mine in high school. Thought it'd be a low-cost but meaningful gift." Her voice was light, but so genuine it made me ashamed of what I'd once called value. And the evening continued, but I was no longer the same. Every glance, every glass of wine, every conversation felt like a pause before I saw her again. I don't remember when I started looking for her in the crowd, but by the time I noticed, it was too late to turn back. Because what happened the second time we met was the real beginning. All through the evening, I acted like a man who knew his role, shaking hands with political hopefuls, nodding to my father's friends, answering bland questions about the market, pretending my heart hadn't just been shaken minutes earlier. But my eyes, they weren't there anymore. They followed her, the girl with the camera, quiet, focused, nearly invisible amid the buzzing crowd. I watched her crouch to catch a child's dash or tilt the lens toward an elderly couple holding hands. She wasn't shooting for money. She shot because she saw what others missed, and I just wanted to see that smile one more time. Have you ever looked at someone and suddenly everything around them made more sense? Not because they were perfect, but because they made everything feel more real. Then I saw a man chatting with her at the bar, and I understood. Jealousy needs no logic to bloom. All it takes is one look to make you move. No plan, no script, no strategy. I just saw him make her laugh, and something in me cracked. I walked toward the bar, champagne glass still nearly full in my hand. "That camera looks pretty serious," I said, immediately regretting the dumbest opening line I'd ever used. But she laughed, truly laughed. Not polite, full, warm, unguarded. "Not really. It's only serious if the person holding it sees the world that way," she replied. I was about to introduce myself when she beat me to it. "Celeste, Grace's friend, wedding photo gift." I nodded, offered my hand. "Ethan." No last name, again. Part of me hoped she'd recognize it. The other part hoped she wouldn't. "Not a professional photographer?" I asked. She shook her head. "I run a small studio in Oakland. But today, I'm here for a friend." Have you ever wanted someone to stay, just so you could hear them say a few more ordinary things? Because for me, every minute with her made the rest of my life feel questionable. And then, something I didn't expect happened. When dinner began, I was seated at the honor table, next to my father's associates and high-level donors from our foundation. Everything was perfect. Gold-rimmed china, expensive wine, recycled wedding toasts delivered in even tones. She sat across the hall at a side table for the bride's friends. Not far, but far enough to make the whole dinner feel like a year. I don't remember the entree. I don't remember who sat beside me. All I remember was her, Celeste, smiling at someone, adjusting her camera strap, jotting notes in a tiny notebook. Have you ever been in a luxurious room, full of people, full of laughter, yet felt like you were waiting for someone to save you from it? I used to think that feeling was for the lonely, but that night, under candlelight and piano chords, I understood. Loneliness isn't the absence of people. It's the absence of someone who truly sees you. And when the music changed tempo, the final chance arrived. Golden lights draped the reception like a nostalgic fog. The DJ switched to a vintage swing track, the kind I heard on my mom's old vinyls. Then, the groom's grandmother's voice cut through the crowd. "Anyone who doesn't dance is missing all the luck." Laughter rang out. Guests rushed the floor like they'd been waiting to shed their polite dinner masks. Then I saw Celeste, smiling nervously as the grandmother herself tugged her into the circle. No planning, no heels, just her and the music. She danced like she'd always lived there, inside the rhythm, the claps, the gentle spins. No performance, no effort, just herself, And that was more beautiful than anything money could ever buy. Have you ever looked at someone and thought, if I don't go now, I'll regret this for the rest of my life? I left my seat, the glass of wine forgotten, my breath caught in my chest. No plan, just a hand and one trembling step forward, and then I reached for her hand. I don't remember exactly what I said when I reached her. Maybe it was a shy invitation to dance. Maybe I didn't say anything at all. All I remember is her eyes, gentle, unhesitating, as if she had known all along I would walk toward her, and then her hand touched mine. No loud music, no applause, just a feeling, as if all other sounds had been drained from the room. We began to move, no routine, no choreography, just two people learning how to exist in the same rhythm. I heard the soft swish of her dress across the wooden floor, smelled her hair, hints of cinnamon and late sunlight, and, for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to be perfect. I've walked into hundreds of rooms, conferences, press events, negotiations, with confidence trained into me since childhood. But that night, I was simply a man learning how to feel. She looked up at me and whispered, "You don't seem like someone who dances at weddings." I laughed, genuinely. Never have, until now. But then the music ended, and we still didn't let go, because what she said next changed everything in me forever. The music faded. People around us clapped, laughed, returned to their wine and cake, but we stood there, as if no one had told us it was time to stop. Celeste was the one to release her hand first, but instead of stepping away, she looked at me, deeply, slowly. "So, Ethan, when you're not in a suit and not dancing at weddings, who are you really?" The question, seemingly light-hearted, left me speechless. I had no answer. Or, rather, I realized I had never even thought about it. I knew who I was in my parents' eyes, in the eyes of investors, in the glowing articles about the next generation of leadership. But when the spotlight fades, who am I? What do I like? What do I hate? What did I once dream about, before everything was programmed for me? Have you ever been asked something that made you realize you've been living someone else's script for too long? I looked at her, tried to speak, and then just sighed. She didn't smile, didn't rush to comfort me. She was just silent, like she was giving me space to find myself. And then she said something that made it impossible for me to turn back. Celeste sat on a wooden bench under a wall strung with soft golden lights, the glow casting across her face in a way no camera could recreate. I sat beside her, drawn as if by invisible gravity. She held a glass of water. No wine, no cocktails. I need a clear mind when I shoot. Emotion is the one thing I can't afford to blur. I smiled, nodded. She said it so simply, yet every word hit something buried deep inside. "And you?" she asked, her voice light as leaves rustling. "Are you living the life you chose, or just the one others wanted for you?" I didn't know how to answer. I had signed million-dollar deals, built a company before 30, was expected to run for office like my father. I had everything, but no one had ever asked me that, ever. Have you ever spent your life trying to be someone's pride, only to be asked by a near stranger if you were even truly happy? I didn't know why her question made my throat tighten, but I knew this. If I stayed silent, I'd lose something greater than reputation. So I chose to tell the truth. I looked her straight in the eyes, not avoiding myself this time. I don't know who I am. If I take away the titles, the company, the family, the expectations, I don't know what's left. Celeste didn't nod, didn't gasp. She just listened. But her eyes, there was no pity in them, only understanding. "That's the most honest thing I've ever heard from a man in a tuxedo," she said with a soft laugh, but her voice cut through layers I had buried. I chuckled too, a rough sound. Not from joy, but from release. "Have you ever clung to a perfect version of yourself? only for someone you barely know to peel it back, and you didn't want them to stop? We sat together for nearly the entire evening after that. I told her about the nights I couldn't sleep, not because of work, but because I couldn't admit I hated the very success I was praised for. She told me about her little studio in Oakland, about why she dropped out of Harvard just a week after orientation. They taught me how to win the world, but not how to keep my soul. And when the clock neared midnight, she stood to pack her gear. I asked, "Can I see you again?" She tilted her head, eyes both kind and cautious. "As long as it's not at a 5-star restaurant or a date scheduled by your assistant." I wasn't sure if I was asking her out or asking for a way out of my pre-programmed life, but I knew, if I lost her, I'd never find out who I really was. That Wednesday, I walked into a small cafe in an old Oakland neighborhood. Light rain fell outside. No revolving glass doors. No valet. No glowing signage. Inside was Celeste. Sitting by the window in a simple yellow dress, hair tied up, camera resting beside a steaming cup of chai. "Shot at the community greenhouse this morning," she said, handing me a second cup, no questions asked. The place was nearly empty. Jazz played low in the background. I, wearing a sweater and jeans, my blazer and luxury watch left behind, sat across from her, feeling like, for once, I truly belonged. We talked about little things, her favorite bookstore, a photo series she did on unhoused people, a vinyl shop that was closing down. I, a man used to discussing IPOs and investment rounds, felt something stir. Because of one simple thing she said, "You know, you're different when you're here, lighter, more real." Have you ever met someone who didn't make you want to impress them, just made you want to be yourself? And the next morning, I did something I hadn't done in 10 years. I hand-wrote a thank you note and sent her wildflowers, not roses, not orchids. The kind of flowers that reminded me of her, and the photo she sent in return left me breathless. That morning, I sat on the 42nd floor of my office, overlooking a fog-covered San Francisco. But my mind was somewhere else, in a room with light slanting through a window, with the scent of cinnamon in the air, with a slanted smile behind rain-streaked glass. I asked my assistant to find a small flower shop, not the $500 a bouquet kind, but somewhere they knew how to arrange wildflowers, unruly and real, like Celeste. I included a handwritten note. "Thank you for letting me feel like myself." Hours later, I got an email. No subject line, no text, just a single photo. The bouquet I sent resting on a windowsill. Sunlight piercing through sheer curtains, and in the center of the frame, her hands gently brushing a petal. No face, but still, unmistakably, her. I stared at that image for 5 minutes, not realizing I had started to cry. Have you ever felt understood by someone, without a single word? From that moment, I knew. This wasn't a fleeting crush. I began rearranging my schedule, just to be where she might be, but what I didn't know was, real love would soon demand I face my greatest fear. I started doing things that never appeared in any business plan. Canceling a strategy meeting with my advisory board just to catch her at a local photography exhibit. Delaying a flight to New York because she mentioned, "I'll be shooting at the old pier this weekend. The sunsets there are unreal." And when my assistant sighed, "Your calendar is a mess," I just smiled, for the first time, seeing chaos as something worth keeping. We spent more time together, not the kind seen on magazine covers, no 5-star dinners, no limousines, just two people walking through a park, laughing as raindrops hit our heads, arguing about which Billie Holiday album was best. Have you ever loved someone not because they made you feel important, but because they made you feel enough, even in the smallest of moments? Then my phone buzzed, a missed call, from my mother. The next message read only 4 words. "Don't forget Sophia, okay?" And just like that, the door to a past I'd tried to shut tight began to creak open. Sophia. The name wasn't unfamiliar. She was the daughter of a long-standing strategic partner in political investment circles, Harvard-educated, polished, intelligent, and, most importantly, according to my mother, a proper match. I'd had dinner with Sophia, once. Polite, dull. Every sip of wine measured and rehearsed. No one said anything wrong, but no one said anything real either. We were two bloodlines shaking hands beneath candlelight and hollow toasts. And now, when I was falling into something entirely different, unplanned, unscripted, my mother brought up her name. Like a slap of cold water against the warmth I'd just begun to feel. Have you ever read a message that made you realize you're living a life your parents never chose for you? I didn't respond. I didn't know where to start, because how could I explain to them that the woman I was falling for didn't come from the right side of the world we lived in? And just when I thought I had time to prepare to ease Celeste into my world, a photo leaked on social media and everything exploded. And when Whitmore appeared beside the phrase photographer from Oakland, everyone had something to say. The photo was grainy, tilted, blurry, taken from a distance, but clear enough to show me and Celeste, hand in hand, shoes off, barefoot on wet sand. The sun setting behind us. A quiet moment, turned into a feast for headlines. The next morning, I woke up to 72 missed calls, emails from the board, a hastily prepared internal memo, and a trending headline on Twitter, Whitmore heir caught in intimate moment with unknown Oakland photographer. But the worst didn't come from the media. It came from the whispers. My assistant forwarded me an anonymous message. Clever choice, artsy, black. Could make a great PR story if you're planning a campaign. Have you ever watched something pure get dragged through the dirt by people who only know how to judge from the outside? Celeste said nothing. No anger, no reaction. She simply said, I'm used to it. The stories people write about me were never mine to begin with. But I wasn't used to it. I wasn't used to love being questioned. I wasn't used to feeling helpless as the woman I loved was reduced to a narrative she never asked for. And then, even Ryan, my closest friend, asked, Are you sure about this, Ethan? You know this doesn't just affect you. I thought I could protect her, but I hadn't yet learned. Love alone isn't enough. Not unless you're brave enough to fight for it. The news spread like wildfire through dry grass. They dug into everything about Celeste, where she studied, blog posts from college, even a past relationship she had never mentioned to me. They called her an unfit match, a photographer chasing a way out, and worse, a PR liability on the eve of East Coast expansion. The board sent me a crisis management plan. They wanted me to create some distance until things settled down, and I didn't immediately say no. Not because I believed what they said, but because I was afraid. Afraid that if I reacted too strongly, I'd pull her into an even worse storm. Afraid that if I stood up now, I'd make it harder for her. So I stayed silent. No calls, no texts, no presents. Have you ever loved someone, and yet your own fear hurt them more than any headline could, and in the moment she needed me most? I said nothing. I thought I was protecting her, but really, I was protecting my own image. And then Celeste called. One final time. The call came Saturday morning. No greeting, no anger, just silence, thick, aching. Then Celeste's voice, soft, slow, like she was holding her heart together one word at a time. You believe them, don't you? After everything we've shared, you think I'm with you because you're a Whitmore? I wanted to say no. I wanted to scream that I believed her, loved her, that I was trying to protect her from the storm, but I said nothing, because the truth is, I had doubted. Not her, myself. Did I deserve a love like this, if all it took was public scrutiny for me to pull away? Have you ever kept quiet? Because you feared even the truth wouldn't be enough to keep someone from walking away? On the other end, I heard her exhale, and the soft sound of something being placed on a table. The key to your apartment. I'll send it back through a friend. I don't want to hate you, Ethan. I just can't be the woman waiting in the shadows, while you stand silent in the spotlight. The call ended, and with it, everything I hadn't been brave enough to fight for. 3 days later, I was no longer a CEO, no longer a poster child, just a man with a reputation that couldn't save the heart he let break. Three days after the call, I moved like a ghost. I still went to work, still wore the suit, still walked the halls with the air of a man in control. But inside, I was hollow. There was no echo left, no one to go home to. Me, once praised as decisive, cold when needed. I couldn't even sign a document. Strategy meetings became meaningless noise. I stared at presentations without understanding why I was there. Because once something truly touches the human in you, everything else that doesn't feels fake. Have you ever loved someone, only to realize that when they leave, every bit of success, every spotlight, every headline, is just a backdrop to the one empty space that matters? That night, I stood outside her apartment, the one she'd visited every weekend. No lights, no silhouette. The key was gone. I asked myself, how many silences does it take before love has nowhere left to return to? And that Wednesday morning, I looked out at the bay from the most expensive penthouse in the city and realized I was the poorest man alive. Because what I lost was the one person who made me feel truly alive. Wednesday morning. The sky was clear, but my thoughts were clouded. I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window in my penthouse. A place where I once convinced myself I was a winner. Now, just a man holding a cup of cold coffee, straining to remember the sound of a voice that had vanished from his life. I looked down at the city, at the streets where I once picked her up, at the cafe she had taken me to, at the corner where she stood in the rain, waiting to capture a late sunset frame. I remembered every detail, the little things I once called trivial. Now, they were the only thread that tied me back to the part of me that still felt human. Have you ever lost someone? Not because they left, but because you didn't step forward when they needed you most? I wondered. If I stood in front of her again, would her eyes still look at me the same way? Would I still have time to say, I was wrong? And in that moment, in the silence between breaths, I knew what I had to do. Not an apology, not flowers, but a single act. Big enough to prove that this time I wouldn't back down. Because if I didn't do something now, I'd spend the rest of my life as a man who only knew how to regret. I remembered something Celeste once said. Photography is how I preserve what the world doesn't find worthy of keeping. So, I called Leah, her closest friend, an independent art curator Celeste had introduced me to during a small gallery event. I need help, I told her, not to impress, not to fix things, but to give her something that should have been hers all along. I rented a historic art space in the Mission District, the same area where she once dreamed of holding her first solo show. I reached out to renowned galleries, had large-scale prints made of Celeste's work over the years. Old street corners, laborers' hands, a child's gaze in a community shelter. I reconstructed every frame the way she once described. Lighting, layout, even the jazz soundtrack she loved. No fanfare, no mention of my name on the invitations. Just one title, Celeste, Things That Deserve to Be Seen. Have you ever done something? Not to be forgiven, but just to let someone know. They deserve to be seen, to be honored, to stand in the light. And then Leah called me back, her voice breaking. She's coming, but Ethan, don't expect anything. She's been hurt, deeply. I nodded, because this time I wasn't coming to win her back. I was coming to return something she never asked for, but had always deserved. And when the gallery doors opened, my heart nearly stopped. The gallery door opened. The soft chime echoed like a sigh. She appeared. No silk dress, no makeup, Just Celeste, with her hair tied high, a coarse fabric coat, and her familiar camera bag. Her eyes scanned the room, resting on her name, printed small beneath each frame. There was no noisy crowd, just a few silent onlookers, a collector, an art journalist, and me, standing in the shadows, fists clenched. I saw her lips tremble as she reached the third photo. It was of an elderly black woman selling flowers on a street corner. Celeste had once told me she was the first person who taught me about light in the eyes. She walked slowly, eyes damp, unblinking. Have you ever witnessed someone, for the first time, see themselves, truly seen, displayed, understood, through the way they view the world? She turned, and finally saw me. Her gaze held no anger, no warmth, only one silent question. Why? I stepped forward, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might shatter in my chest. And what I was about to say wasn't an apology. It was the first truth I'd spoken since she left. I approached slowly, keeping distance. She stood there, surrounded by her own work, perhaps for the first time truly displayed as it deserved to be. No longer tucked away in a tiny studio, no longer hung on cafe walls. Today, she stood in the light, and, for the first time, I was not the center of it. "You did this?" she asked, her voice low but not sharp. "Or is this just another PR strategy you're so good at no one notices?" I swallowed hard, met her eyes. "Not PR, not damage control, because you've always deserved this, long before I ever came into your life." She said nothing, but I saw her grip tighten around her camera strap. Celeste. I was wrong. I was wrong to stay silent, to let fear and reputation speak louder than my heart. I don't love you because you're different. I love you because with you, I finally know who I am. Have you ever said something you knew might never be forgiven, but said it anyway, because not saying it would be worse? I took a step closer. If you can't forgive me, I understand. But if there's even 1,000th of a chance, I'll stay. Every day. To prove that I choose you, this time, without hesitation. She didn't reply right away, but her eyes, for the first time in weeks, weren't closed off anymore, and I knew either everything would end here, or something miraculous was about to begin. The room was quiet. No more murmuring guests, no more footsteps brushing against the gallery floor. Just the two of us, surrounded by images, yet stripped bare like a confession. Celeste still stood, but her hands had loosened. Her eyes, no longer guarded, just one unspoken question, louder than anything she'd said. This time, "Where will you stand when things get hard again?" I stepped forward, slowly, not begging, not performing, just a man, with nothing left to hide. I can't promise it will be easy, but I can promise I won't run again. Have you ever loved someone so deeply that it didn't matter if you were forgiven, only that they knew you wouldn't disappear again? "If you let me stay," I said, voice low and hoarse, "I'll build every day like a testament. That love isn't what we say when it's convenient. It's who we show up as, when everything goes wrong." She looked at me for what felt like forever, and then, under the soft gallery lights, she stepped toward me, no words, just her hand gently touching mine. Enough to break the world inside me and rebuild it. But everything truly shifted when she whispered. She held my hand, not tightly, but without trembling. Her eyes didn't tear up, but they softened enough to silence me. "I don't need promises," she said gently. "I don't need flowers or this exhibition, even though I know all of it came from your heart." She paused, took a breath to steady herself. "What I need is to know that when the storms return, because they will, you won't disappear again." No one ever taught me that keeping a woman wasn't about grand gestures, but about staying quietly when no one is watching. No one ever told me that sometimes Trust isn't built on achievements, but on silent consistency. Have you ever been given a second chance? Not because they forgot the past, but because they believed you wouldn't repeat it? I nodded. No drama, no hollow promises, just a nod, as if, for the first time, I understood. Love isn't about having someone. It's about staying when every reason says leave. Celeste stepped into my arms, and, for the first time, I didn't hold her to keep her. I held her to begin again, because from that moment on, love wasn't something I feared losing. It became something I dared to live for. After that day, nothing went back to normal. We didn't go back. We started over, from new ground, where trust was built not with promises, but quiet, consistent presence. I walked away from a major deal my father had prepared for over a year, chose instead to focus on community tech projects, initiatives that serve the people most often left behind, not to prove anything, but because now I knew my purpose wasn't to win, it was to connect. Celeste expanded her studio. She began teaching and mentoring young artists in the city's forgotten zones. Her work started appearing in international art magazines. But she never let the spotlight blind her vision. We still argued over small things, still had silent moments because we were different. But every morning when I turned over and saw her, soft morning light brushing her shoulder, I knew I don't need anyone else to validate my success. All I need is for her to still believe I'm someone worth choosing. Have you ever loved someone so deeply that waking beside them made you want to be better, not because you had to, but because you wanted to? And when my mother finally came over for dinner at our home, she saw a photo Celeste had taken of me, smiling, unguarded, framed in our living room. She didn't say much, but as she left, she simply murmured, "You look more like yourself now." And for the first time in my life, I didn't need any legacy other than that. True love isn't always loud. It's not always easy, and it certainly doesn't always get applause. It can begin with an awkward dance at a vineyard wedding, grow from quiet conversations in a worn-down cafe, and sometimes it's tested by the very thing we fear most, losing someone unlike anyone we've ever known. Celeste didn't come into my life to change my world. She came to show me that if I never stepped out of the perfect role I was handed, I'd spend my whole life under lights where no one really sees me. Today, I'm no longer the Whitmore heir. I'm just a man who dared to love, dared to fall, dared to try again, and dared to stand beside the woman the world told me not to choose. And if you, watching this video, have ever stood at that crossroads, to live for others' expectations, or to live for your own heart, I hope you find the courage to choose the second, because life is too short to live by a script, and real love doesn't need approval. It just needs to be held on to. If this story touched something in your past, your present, or your heart, hit like. Share it with someone who once loved, but was too afraid to say it. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss stories that just might help you rediscover yourself in the most unexpected places, because who knows? The person you're searching for might be hearing this story right now too, and sometimes love only needs one story to begin again.